Welcome to the Young Film Academy podcast, the essential podcast for teenagers looking to make their way into the creative industries. I'm Amelia Sciandra, and I'm here with brilliant co-host Dan Allen.
How's it going, Amelia? Nice to be with you.
Yeah, it's going really great. I'm super excited about the episode that we have today about our guest, who is a brilliant actress, and Dan and I are very big fans of a particular television show that she was in, one of these sort of off-the-cuff television shows that maybe not everybody is familiar with, but maybe after hearing Dan and I gush about it, you'll consider going and watching it. So we are speaking today with Fiona Dourif. She is an actress with some experience as a producer as well. She is her family is in the industry, which she will speak to us about, and the show that Dan and I love is called Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency. It's a strange name for a strange show, but really fun, super interesting. And Fiona is just bonkers brilliant in it. I mean, she is playing just a character that is, you know, really, really just nuts, but in the best way. And her performance is transformative and just terrific.
It really is. It really is a great show. Especially, if you like sci-fi, if you like things that are a bit off the wall, but then there's real sort of like human emotion and beautiful character work inside of this crazy journey that these characters go on. So make sure you check it out. And I mean, the rest of Fiona's list of credits is just amazing. I mean, Shameless, Tenet, Hellstrom, The Stand, The Blacklist, so many cool things. Upcoming films as well. On Fire is out now, and Unsinkable is out now as well. A real amazing sort of list of credits and brilliant films and TV shows that she's been in.
So let's get into it. Let's see what she has to tell us about her experiences. Welcome to the podcast, Fiona.
Oh, thank you for having me. Thrilled to talk to you guys.
We are so excited.
We're so excited to talk to you, obviously. Now, can you tell us, just because we know from your accent, where are you potting in from? Where are you based in the United States?
Well, I am actually a Los Angeles native. So I was born in Woodstock, New York to two hippies and then raised in Los Angeles. I actually live in Lisbon, Portugal now.
Oh, wow.
So I'm actually coming to you from Lisbon, but my whole life I've been kind of in between Los Angeles and New York.
Wow. What brought you to Lisbon? Was that did you end up accidentally there on a shoot and then you were like, I want to stay here? Or was it somewhere that you sort of discovered via family or?
It's, I'm here only for the lifestyle. But I was actually doing a film festival in Spain, Sitges, and I was talking to a friend and he had kind of up and moved to Barcelona, and I had lived in Europe when I was in my early 20s, and our industry, the movie business has changed a little bit. So when I was coming up, we had to be in kind of major cities, and now most of casting is done off tape.
Yeah.
So I was able to move, and it's very recent. I at the moment live in Portugal.
Wow.
That's so great.
Speak to me in a year and see if I can keep it up.
I was going to say, do you speak Portuguese? Is that something that was already in your wheelhouse before you chose there?
No. Falo um pouco de português agora, but no, I had a little bit of Spanish, and actually everybody asked me that question. My father is like, "How are you going to learn Portuguese?" But you just kind of do. So I'm not. I find that part of it actually kind of exciting. So.
Yeah, that's terrific. That's brilliant. And a really interesting thing, I wondered if actually, why don't we just start there because of what you said, this sort of the way that the industry's changed, how you've seen it change over the course of your career. From what we've read about you, and please correct us, obviously, if the internets have got it wrong, but, you sort of started quote unquote late for what some people consider, I know your first credit, you were in your 20s. Were you doing anything kind of before you got on television that was industry adjacent?
The short answer is, no. I can say that the answer is yes. I didn't sort of know what I wanted to do, but I did in my very early 20s. So I would say I lived actually in Europe and sort of went to school from 18 to 22. And then, though didn't complete college. And then from 22 onward, I worked as a kind of segment producer for History Channel documentaries. So
Oh,
I would
cool.
organize crews and do research on subjects like if a spaceship flew, what would be the physics that would make it operate? And this was like a kid doing it, so I didn't really know what I was talking about. But it was like preliminary research on documentaries that you see on the Discovery Channel or History Channel or stuff, and then organizing film shoots. So yeah, I've been around this sort of thing my whole life.
So are you pulling together the experts? Because I know they get sort of memed online quite a lot, the sort of the History Channel experts. Are you the one pulling them together and finding the most credible people to talk about hypothetical alien craft? And
that is exactly it. That is exactly
that sounds
it.
so
We also
fun.
did one on, and then organizing actual shoots. So when people would go and shoot B-roll and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Well,
and then we did one on sharpshooters.
Cool.
It was very varied. It was interesting work, actually.
So you had a pretty good idea about
really
the
cool.
process before you ended up on a set. So you must have had a much clearer idea when you were on set as an actor of sort of who people were and what was going on. Did you feel that way?
Oh, very much so, but for a different reason. So my father is an actor, and my father, who's Bart Curlish, he's been a character actor since the 70s, and he is the least Hollywood person that anybody would ever meet, by which you would never know if you were meeting him or hanging out in our house that he is a working actor. He doesn't talk about it. It's not. It wasn't. We were a very kind of normal middle class family, but with the exception of I've been around on sets my whole life since I can remember. So I knew who each person was and how important an AD was and how to be quiet and the culture of what work and time is very important. And so it's about the project in front of you, not about, whether I needed to go to the bathroom or I wanted to leave. So yeah, respect for the set and the work was instilled in me from a very young age.
Yeah, that's brilliant. We should say you're for our listeners trying to sort of place your father as an actor, and then we'll obviously place you. Your father is probably most famously the voice of Chucky, the doll, in the variety of horror films and series, which you're now on, which we'll talk about in a minute. And then for all of the other Lord of the Rings nerds out there, of which Dan and I are two very large ones, Fiona's father, Brad, was Grima Wormtongue, who is some of the most brilliant acting ever.
Fiona, to be very clear as well, me and Amelia are both massive Lord of the Rings fans, but also we're both massive Dirk Gently fans. So we were devastated when it didn't get a series 3 and stuff. So that's added to our excitement in sort of talking to you.
Oh, cool. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much. I was going to say also, for those classic films, I think my dad's most beautiful role is One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, where he was nominated for an Oscar. It's a really beautiful piece of filmmaking, and he is perfectly innocent and expressive and kind of heartbreaking in that role. So I would also tell people to go check that out.
Yes, thank you. I was going to get to that, and I'm glad that you didn't help me forget it, because obviously that's an Oscar-nominated role, which is probably the one I should have said first. But the nerds over here are happy about
the nerd sort of overtook. I think really.
I like
the nerd overtook the nerd overtook the pretentious film buff. So you were sort of a child of the industry, but as you've highlighted for us, not really, in the sense that your father is he's a big actor, and we know him, but he's not necessarily, as you would maybe type at Hollywood. And so you had, as you say, a relatively interesting sort of pathway into it. And then what got you onto screen? What was the decision that helped you decide that you actually wanted to follow in your father's footsteps?
Yeah, so I took acting classes when I was young. Like I definitely wanted to do it. When I was say 9, 10, 11. There's something about, being on stage and losing yourself that's very, very exhilarating.
Yeah.
And then I sort of didn't follow that. And when I was working in the documentaries, my father was on a show called Deadwood, and I was able to work sort of behind the scenes. And the creator of Deadwood is this man, David Milch, and he made it a point to be generous in this kind of both like financial and spiritual way. And he, talking to me, thought that maybe I could be an actress. This sounds like an insane story, but this is actually what happened. And he used to, through Alcoholics Anonymous, which I'm not in, but he would give improv classes to like people in Los Angeles who were in recovery. And I'm not in recovery, but he was like, do you want to do this? And I was maybe 23 at the time and thought, yeah, I used to do it when I was young. Like, why not? And I remember really distinctly going on stage and doing a improv and having this like quasi spiritual experience where I was like felt so free, like I was flying, and it felt so right. And I thought to myself, if I could make a living doing this, that would be the luckiest life I can think of.
Yeah.
Now, mind you, it took me 11 years of waiting tables and bartending before I was able to not have another job. So it wasn't immediate, and it was like, like really kind of exhausting and hard. And, but I just decided that I had to give it a shot.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. Yeah, Deadwood is maybe not one for our listeners at this moment, but when they get a little bit older, check out Deadwood. It's an excellent television show, just maybe not for young people. And so, you've done a lot of kind of a variety of things over the course of your career. And I'm just wondering, what stands out to you as some of your happiest memories? Or what are some of the work that you're the most proud of that you've done as an actor?
Yeah. Well, I would say the wildest swing I've ever taken is Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency. I played a kind of homeless quasi monster assassin. Talk like this. It was just a role
the
that
voice is the best. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a role that you often don't get to do. I mean, it felt very imaginative. And Max Landis, who kind of created it, is a very talented writer and very imaginative guy. And I got to do that for 2 seasons. And some of my best memories are, it's almost impossible to answer that question, because how I've experienced acting is, you get presented with these little adventures. Someone says to you, you get to go to this place and be, treated okay, and make this thing with these people, really kind of involve yourself in it as much as you can in some city that you wouldn't be in. Like you're tomorrow you're going to New Orleans, or like even like somewhere in Wisconsin. And or Malaysia. So it's just an exceedingly lucky industry to be able to work in, if you can handle how frighteningly inconsistent it can be.
Yeah. And we hear that obviously, particularly now more than ever, it's incredibly inconsistent off the back of obviously the strikes, which needs to happen. But this sort of industry is still finding its feet a little bit, is my understanding. Is that, I mean, maybe not for yourself. I know you've got quite a few things on the horizon that are coming out.
Oh, I'll interrupt you. Absolutely. That
Okay.
I feel that.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. When in my 20s and 30s, there was something called pilot season, which, you know, everybody would fly to Los Angeles and they would be there in February and March for the casting of all of the network pilots. And, you know, there would be 70 pilots being cast. There's, what was it? 1 this year? 1. I mean, it was, they were written about it. There's talent agencies that are closing in Los Angeles. I mean, there's like 35% less work. I have gotten I really feel the contraction. I really feel the contraction.
Yeah.
But you know, but I've lived through them before, and this is part of the inconsistency.
Well, and that was what I wanted to ask you, is that, you know, obviously it's always peaks and troughs. It's always, you know, mountains and valleys in terms of the work and one's acting career. But I did wonder, in terms of your kind of experience over the last, you know, 20-ish years, whereas you said, you know, now you can be based in Portugal because everything is tapes, you know, on the first audition. Did you feel that, you know, this shift into taping and this ability to kind of be global, how did you experience that? Was that a big shift that you've seen, that you've felt over your course of your career?
Yes, I felt the difference. I personally welcome it. I welcome taping for the first 1 or 2 rounds of a casting session, just because I personally get nervous walking into rooms. And before, they used to have these tests that were like, they just felt like sometimes like a torture chamber. I remember I had one test for a pilot that I got there at 8:30 in the morning, and they were like, you have to be here at 8:30 in the morning, and we are going to have you stay until 5 p.m. It was insane.
Interesting.
And then sometimes I remember I tested for Nurse Jackie. And can I explain what testing is so that they?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. I was going to say, could you explain testing to give us an idea of what that means?
So they do this thing in television, in American television. I don't know if in England, but where it's down to the last few people for a role. So say there will be between like 2 actors or 5 actors, all, you know, for the same role, and the producers like all of them. They will negotiate a deal for the next 5 years with your agent. So you will know like how much money you're going to make. You're going to know residuals. You're going to know like even down to what trailer you'll have. There'll be these long negotiations. And then you show up on the day. You know the stakes of what getting this job is because it's been negotiated. You're very nervous, but you're even more nervous now. You're brought into a room, and then you have to sign all of the paperwork. And then they're like, Go in and audition. And so it's, you know, all the nerves, but even then more nerves than you can stomach. And then sometimes they keep you around for, you know, for hours, so that the first, like say 4 girls go in first and then 2 leave, and then it's down to 2 girls, and then you audition again. So it's a real exercise in stamina.
Yeah.
And in
perseverance.
And perseverance. Yeah. And I think they still do some tests like this, but now often they'll do tests on tape. So they just present tape.
Did that process make you know, by the time when you then get the role and then you're on set, does being on set then feel sort of almost like child's play? I didn't mean that as a pun. That feels awful. Okay. Does that mean when you actually get the job, suddenly it's like, well, everything is easy now in comparison because I went through that horrendous torture chamber? Is there any silver lining, or are you still super nervous because you're worried that they're going to sort of almost change their mind once you're actually on set?
Well, actually, I tend to be more nervous than the first table read because people don't realize that how important table reads are. So I have been on a few series where actors have been fired after table reads.
Wow.
So that can happen. And so I would say that if I make it through that and the table read, I think usually for me, the first week is pretty nerve-wracking, and then you get very used to it. And as my career's gone on, I have, your confidence builds, but I always, I'm always a little nervous.
Yeah. Just whilst we were on auditioning, obviously when you have a role like the crazy assassin in Dirk Gently, how much of that is you have preconceived what you think the character is, and so you're going in with like 500% energy for a show that's as bonkers as Dirk Gently, or how much is sort of discovered and found with the director or with the other artists in the film or in the series? Sorry.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, the thing that I like the most about acting is the exercise of sort of putting the puzzle together of why the person thinks and feels the way they do. So that stuff is usually, and oftentimes I write and write and write and write. I don't know why. I never do. I never read the pages again, but that part is usually set. And then what I want is for the performance to be malleable within my truth. So if the director gives me a note, or if the person in front of me, does something that was unexpected, it doesn't throw me. I just like react in a way that is true given my very specific relationship with the other actor not with the other actor, but with the characters.
Yeah.
Within the characters' situations. That's the goal. And I hope to discover. I always hope to discover. I always want to take to end in a way that I had no idea it was going to happen. And that's what's usually lost with auditioning. Is auditioning often feels like you're executing something, because it's an exercise in feeling like action oftentimes when you can't actually do the action, or sometimes I've done a lot of genre, which I absolutely love. And oftentimes with genre auditions, they'll have you like running. They'll have a scene where like the actor is like running and then tackled to the ground and then shot and then died. And I'm like, I have to do that standing up in one place. Like making out with somebody and then coming out and like saying I love you. And so it's just a different exercise.
Yeah.
It's not quite acting. It's like,
do you add in the slow motion as well, sort of to add to the the tension?
I mean, it's funny. I have a lot of actor friends, and oftentimes they call me for this kind of stuff because I think I might be good at that particular part of acting, or that particular part of this, which is like figuring out how to not look too stupid doing action that you can actually do. That is my skill.
That is definitely a skill set. That's definitely a very good skill set to have. Yeah, because if we know, the tape, they often ask you to do something in a tape that is, very silly compared to what actually it will be like on the set. I wanted to ask you, sort of combining all the things we've been discussing about now your experience working on the Chucky television series, where you're sort of working with your father. And I think in some instances you have literally been working with your father, but obviously he's doing the voice work. And just wanted to know what that experience was like. Is that something that you were looking forward to? How has it kind of turned out in this sort of turn of events that you and your father are sharing a cast?
Yeah. I mean, it's, I don't mean to sound cheesy, but like this part of my career feels like a lottery that I won somehow. Chucky is wildly fun to make, and that's not always true for series. Sometimes you can get there and like people are very stressed out and it's fraught. Chucky is not that at all. It really feels like a family, and it kind of often literally is for me. So I feel very kind of close and protective over it, and really, really lucky, really lucky. My father and I have actually never worked together on screen before this last episode that just aired. And it was,
Wow.
yeah, again, it's cheesy, but it just felt like a gift. Me and my father are quite close. I lost my mother. So he's like a very kind of, it's where he's my dad. I mean, I'm 42 and I call him daddy still. But we got to share a screen and, talk about acting. And yeah, it just feels like a gift.
That's brilliant. Yeah, what that is a gift. It's very special, obviously, and I think that's great. And I don't know if I can ask you about this, so let me know if we need to not talk about it. But I believe that they put you in a prosthetic to look like him. Is that true?
Oh my God. Yes, that's totally true. It was so strange. So the creator, so I've been part of the Child's Play series since 2013. I first was in a movie called Curse of Chucky, and then a following movie called Cult of Chucky. And I was the kind of final girl lead of those two movies. And then, so I've been involved with the franchise for a long time as this one specific character. And then Don Mancini, who I've known since now 2013, who created Chucky. Me and him actually became quite good friends over the course of the years. And he said that I look enough like my father that with prosthetics I could play him. And I kind of just didn't think about it again until to a camera test. And then they put me in. It took about 3.5 to 4 hours to make me look like that. And I thought I really didn't even think about what it was going to feel like until I was like halfway through. And then it felt quite weird. It felt very, very weird. Yeah, I still actually haven't unpacked exactly how many things it made me feel. But I also, I was like, I like make out with a woman as my father, which was weird. And, it was fun and very strange, and something that I'm going to have some perspective on at some point in my life. Talk to me when I'm 50.
Yeah, once you sort of unpacked it with a therapist and whatnot.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you go to him for sort of tips on like, how would you deliver this, or how would you physically perform this? Or did you sort of study some of his previous, movement in other works?
So there's actually very little footage of my father playing Charles Lee Ray. So my dad is the voice of Chucky, but he's also was the physical actor that died in the beginning of the first movie, which came out in 1987. It's very old. But it was a real cult classic. And he's only shot over the course of the 30 years of the franchise 3 short scenes as Charles Lee Ray.
Wow.
Which was actually quite helpful for me that there was so little to go off of, because my performance was not a mimic, which I think would have been harder to do. It was my version of what that character is. Right? Because my father was definitely not playing himself. And he had one conversation about what makes the Charles Lee Ray tick, and what makes him tick for my father had no effect on me, so I couldn't use it. Like it just didn't activate me at all. So the entire thing was sort of my own, and had to do with power, sort of. And I've played a few killers before, and my understanding of it is usually power and like some deep-seated insecurity, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. Listen, I'm conscious of time, so I want to ask you what we always love to ask our guests. And I'm particularly interested in a sort of section of time that you haven't spoken to us about, which is what you were doing as a teenager. So you told us you were kind of in acting classes as a young person, and then in Europe and in university. when you were in your 20s, but in that time between when you were a teenager, was there anything that you were doing that you feel sort of has fed into your becoming an actor now?
Um, I had a tough time as a teenager. I struggled a lot in a lot of ways, and I didn't really enjoy that time as much. And I think that is ultimately okay. There was something about feeling bad and struggling a lot that informed me later in roles, which was quite helpful. So that's the truth of that. Yeah, it was being a teenager was a little tough for me. And
Yes,
that
yeah.
ultimately, with retrospect, was absolutely okay.
Yeah.
So thinking about that teenager who struggled a bit, and I'm sure we have listeners who are resonating with that, what kind of advice would you give teenage Fiona if you could go back and speak to her?
Oh, I would say to teenage Fiona to take it a little easy, and that everything changes a lot. And that every experience that I had helped me have perspective in a way that made me singular. That was quite useful. So that I would say to the teenager Fiona, and then career wise, for the professional, I would say that if I had this is a little controversial, but if I had a choice to start working professionally younger, I would have rather done that. I think that people are often scared of robbing somebody of their childhood. I do find, though, that I know many healthy adults who acted as a teenager, and what I think that helps with is being quite comfortable with a camera in your face, because it took me a few years to really get my ground with that. So two things. I would give Fiona a hug and tell her that everything changes, and it changes drastically. And there's a lot of wonderful life. And then the other thing is, if I would give Fiona a few professional auditions younger than she was.
Amazing. Fiona, thank you so much. This has been really special. Thank you for sharing your time with us.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you I really loved it. You have a good one.
Thank you.
What I loved, Amelia, about what she was talking about is just I hadn't really thought about the idea of playing a character that someone else has played before. I just think it's such like now that I've said that out loud, I'm like, that's what everyone does with Shakespeare. But I feel like when it's been on screen, it feels slightly different. I don't know why. Maybe because you're assuming there's some chronology there that you wouldn't necessarily get on theatre, where it's a completely new adaptation or completely new interpretation. Have you ever had to do that in your acting?
Yeah, well, it makes me think of. Obviously, I've done lots of Shakespeare, so I'm playing. And I do remember the opportunity I had to play Portia in The Merchant of Venice, where she speaks like one of the most famous speeches in all of Shakespeare, the Quality of Mercy speech. I did sort of feel this sense of every Portia that had ever come before, and this kind of like it turns into sort of a responsibility, where you really want to do right by it. And I do think that's a unique thing about theater and about enduring theater, like Shakespeare or anything that any plays that haven't just been written, you are always sort of recreating something. But it was interesting to hear her talk about it in this kind of filmic aspect, where she was recreating a role that, even though it was played by her father, as she said, I think she said he'd only done 3 scenes over the course of, over 30 years that franchise has existed. So there is that interesting sort of element there of sort of, she said she didn't want to be a mimic, right? But you are sort of paying homage to something that already exists. You can't completely reinvent the wheel. Otherwise, people will go, what the heck is this? It's nothing like we wanted it to be or we expected it to be. Which
Hey,
does
what
make
are
me
you
think
doing?
about it does make me think about, when I'm thinking of young actors who might be trying to make their way into this industry. If you've not been in a film or anything, you can still make, what we call show reel material, right? You can make your own sort of either straight to camera or just off camera little
Yes.
scenes, little tapes to help you maybe be accepted by an agent or be seen by a casting director. And a lot of times the best way to do that is to take a scene that already exists, right, from film or television and try to recreate it. But what I've just said is really wrong, right? You're not trying to recreate it. You're taking on that role for yourself, right? So it isn't about doing a scene from a film and going, I'm going to act just like Jennifer Lawrence, or I'm going to do this, just like Zendaya. It's not about doing it just like them, right? It's about taking on that
Yeah.
role and bringing yourself and sort of something new to it, which is definitely a challenge, I think, and is one of those parts of acting that is weird. It's a strange thing to pretend to be somebody else for your job.
Yeah, well, what acting's weird. it was sort of the conclusion there. Well, I think she mentioned the most important thing, right? Which no matter which character, whether it's a character that has been performed before by someone else, or whether it's an entirely new character, it doesn't really matter. It's about finding your personal truth, finding the thing that you connect with that allows you to put yourself in that person's shoes. And you'll have a better idea than I. Like, to me, I always think of substitution. I think of, okay, well, what's that maybe thing that's happened to you, or what's that thing that you can replace in the intention of the character that allows you to sort of really play the emotions and really feel them. But is there more nuance to it than just substitution? How would you describe finding that connection with a character that you're playing as an actor?
Yeah, I mean, again, without sort of sounding cheesy or totally woo-woo, my philosophy is that you are getting to do something that is, almost holy, which is you're telling someone else's truth. When you are performing as an actor, you are taking on the role of somebody else to tell their truth in the most authentic way you can. And so rather than substitution, I sort of go at it, substitution I think can help. And it is a sort of really, it's a tool. I think it's an exercise that can help you get into something. But I sort of always start with empathy and thinking, if I were this person, how would I be feeling? What is the experience I would be having if I were in their shoes? And it's one of the things I think is the most important about being a successful actor is really recognizing empathy. The story that my acting teachers always said back in the day was, if you're going to play Hitler, you got to tell Hitler's truth. And that doesn't mean that you as an actor agree with Hitler's truth, but he believed his truth, right? He believed it. So your job as the actor is to believe it when you're playing him the way he did. And so that's, I think, where the empathy comes in, and you can sort of put yourself in their shoes. But I found it interesting that, Fiona picked out that when she took on playing the role that her father had voiced, only done in those 3 scenes, Charles, the actual human, she said that whatever kind of thing he used to get into the character didn't resonate with her. So she had to discover something else. And I think that's also really important, is that, whatever you find that resonates with you, there isn't a right or wrong answer. It's what works best for you as you're bringing a character to life.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. We have a question, Amelia.
Great.
We have a question from Sarah. Sarah wonders, which is very, very suitable based on what Fiona was saying. But Sarah wonders, what tricks can I use to calm myself down before an audition?
This is a great question. And actually, you could not have potentially asked this to the more right person than this gal right here, Amelia, because That is sort of what I did my master's thesis on when I studied
Yeah.
acting. I studied auditioning, and I did.
No way.
I
I
did,
didn't
yeah,
know
yeah, we haven't
this.
ever talked about this, but I studied auditioning and the kind of,
We haven't.
you know, both the sort of actual logistical notion of auditioning and what people ask for in auditions. Mine was focused on drama school, but a lot of what I learned is applicable to all auditions. So, you know, what I learned, the formula that I kind of came away with, that I teach people when I teach this kind of thing, which I do, I offer kind of coaching and things like this, is there's two things. There's a physical thing that could be happening, and there's a psychological thing that could be happening, and they're connected. So there's actually something physiological going on with you when you are going to audition. And this is how I explain it.
Interesting.
When Homo sapiens were evolving out of Cro-Magnons and Neanderthals and into what we are now, we had a lot of real dangers in our lives, right? We were literally running from tigers, right? Because the world was wild and we had these true dangers that we experienced, physical dangers. And so what we developed is what is often called the fight, flight, or freeze response, right? And this is because when we saw a tiger, we kind of had three
Mm.
options that a human body would do. You'd either run the heck away as fast as you could, flee. You'd fight, right? You'd pick up your spear and think, I'm going to get this tiger.
Ah.
Or you'd freeze, right? You'd turn yourself into the smallest ball possible and think, maybe if I don't move, this tiger won't eat me. And what's happening to us physiologically when we go into fight, flight, or freeze are all of these things that our body, our minds think are helpful. So, for example, all the blood in fight, flight, or freeze, all the blood rushes to your main organs. So when you get nervous and you get that butterfly feeling in your tummy, that's all of your blood rushing to your vital organs because it thinks it needs to do that to help you when you inevitably get attacked by a tiger. So this is a real thing that's happening to you that your body thinks it's being helpful. It's going, "Oh, I'll send all the blood there." But what's happening to us in our contemporary world is we aren't running from a tiger. We're getting ready to walk into an audition.
It's not helpful,
Right, it's
buddy.
not helpful. So you're getting frightened. And the other thing that happens is our saliva dries up because it's kind of storing it at the back of the mouth, getting ready to scream. Because it thinks, you know, scream for the tiger. And so our mouth dries out, which is not helpful when you need to talk for an audition, which probably you will need to do. And so there's a number of different things. Our heart starts beating faster because it thinks we might need to run. So it's like prepping the body for exercise, all of those kinds of things. And again, none of them are helpful in our contemporary world for when we feel that fight, flight, or freeze response in a situation that isn't actually dangerous, right? We're very lucky that we don't often find ourselves running from tigers nowadays. And so our bodies are still having these really crazy responses when we're experiencing something that isn't so dangerous. And so I'm going to just give you two really easy tips, Sarah, for dealing with your nerves before an audition. They are physical things that can help to slow down the physiological. Now, just to say, the psychological part of it is just really important. You need to be talking kindly to yourself. You need to be telling yourself positive messaging. You need to say, I'm going to be okay. This audition's going to go as well as I can make it go. I'm in control. All of those things are really important. Mantras, all of that really does help. But physically, two things that you can do to help you. You can make your out breath longer than your in breath. So basically, you can breathe in, counting to 4, and then try to breathe out, counting to 8. This is actually going to start sending messages from the brain to the gut to slow all of that physiological response down. And you actually want to do it sort of as long as you can. So you might breathe in on 4 and out on 8, and then breathe in on 5 and out on 10, and then in on 6 and out on 12. Try to make your out breaths really long. And that's going to slow down all of that stuff that's happening. The other thing is to kind of anchor in the present. And so you can do this by just paying attention to your five senses. So what am I feeling right now? What can I touch with my hands? Or if I'm not touching anything, to pick something up, so to hold your paper, if you got, your sides on your script on a piece of paper, hold the paper and really think, how does this paper feel in my hands? Hone in on the sensation of that feeling. Then you could sort of you could use your sight sense and go, what am I seeing? And you could find something to count. For example, I'm sitting here and I'm going to count all the exit signs, all the way out signs for the building that I'm in. You could sort of focus in on your hearing and go, what are the specific sounds that I'm hearing right now? Oh, I think the water bottle, the water machine is making this kind of interesting sound. And I just heard a door slam. So you can basically use your senses to kind of ground you in the moment. And that's kind of distracting the brain from the fight, flight, or freeze response. And then it's going to slow down all of that stuff that's happening to you physically, which is going to make you all the more successful in your audition.
Amelia, that is amazing advice from the expert herself.
That was a really long-winded response.
Thank you so much for that. My useless bit to add, which isn't really... No. The only thing, this is something that's actually not going to be helpful to anyone, especially not to you, Sarah. But in terms of fight, flight, and freeze, and fear of sort of predators, and that being the origin for it, I learned that they did an experiment with mice where they basically flew these shapes over the top of this mice cage, and they'd fly over like different object shapes, different silhouettes. And they'd fly over triangles, squares, and then they started to do like outlines of like different animals. And the moment they got to a bird of prey, all the mice freaked out and they all panicked, even though they'd all been born in captivity. So they had built into their genetics to be scared of their natural predators. And apparently that is why most young people or kids will have nightmares about monsters, and monsters will generally resemble either wolves or bears, or maybe tigers if you're, from a tigery area, genetically. But that is, I thought really interesting about why monsters resemble these creatures. They resemble these predators that we may not have even encountered personally ourselves, but we have built into our genetics, like these mice, this fear of these creatures. But in today's world, that can, it gets tricked, doesn't it, by stressful situations that very much are not helped by the fight, flight, or freeze mechanic. But with your useful tips, I think we can all get through it. We can all get better at getting through it. So thank you so much, Amelia.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, well, and I do think, what you said is so fascinating, and also proof that, like, when you are in that moment, when you're having that fight, flight, or freeze response, that you're not punishing yourself, because it's literally in our DNA. We are having this response. It's a very human thing to experience. So it's just about using coping mechanisms to help kind of come away from that, but not punishing yourself when you feel that way, because it's natural.
Absolutely. Amelia, thank you so much for joining me. This has been an absolute treat as always. Thanks to Fiona. And make sure you check out CHUCKY on TV as well. It's on Peacock and Sci-Fi. And make sure you go watch it, because maybe it will get a new season if the viewing figures are good. So make sure you watch, enjoy. Fiona's also got a couple of movies out at the moment, Unsinkable and On Fire. So check them out. We'll see you soon.
Thanks so much.